Welcome. Find a comfortable position. Allow your body to settle, to grow heavy, and let your mind begin to quiet. Tonight, we're journeying to the edge of the land, to a place of solitude and steadfastness. We are going to explore the quiet world of the lighthouse keeper. For centuries, these silent sentinels have stood watch over treacherous coastlines, their beacons a promise of safe passage. But what of the lives lived within these lonely towers? What of the men and women who tended the lights, whose days were measured not by the turning of the tide and the setting of the sun? Join me as we step back in time and into the peaceful, ordered world of the Keeper of the Light. Our story begins not with the keeper, but with their home, the stone tower itself. Before a keeper could light the lamp, the tower had to be raised, often in the most inhospitable of locations. Imagine the minds that conceived of this. The engineers, who drew plans for a structure that could defy the full, relentless power of the ocean. They chose the stone with care. Granite, mostly. A stone born of ancient fire and pressure, now called to serve as a bastion against the waves. Think of the masons, men with calloused hands and patient eyes, shaping each block with a hammer and chisel. The rhythmic clink, clink, clink of their work would have been the first man-made sound to grace these lonely rocks, a sound of slow, deliberate creation. They worked through wind and spray, their efforts a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance. The tower rose not in weeks or months, but often over years, a slow, stone-upon-stone meditation. And now, let us approach it as a keeper would. We step out of a small supply boat, the air thick with the smell of salt and wet rock. Before us, the tower rises, a seamless column of gray stone, streaked with green lichen and the white stains of salt left by countless storms. It seems to grow directly from the rock, a natural extension of the earth reaching for the sky. The door is our entry point into this secluded world. It is not a grand entrance, but a humble, functional one, made of thick, solid oak, swollen slightly by the damp air and bound with heavy iron straps. It is built to repel intruders, whether they be the sea itself or the howling gales of winter. The handle is cool and solid in the hand. The key, a hefty piece of iron, turns in the lock with a satisfying, deep clunk. The door groans open, a sound that is not one of decay, but of strength. The sound of a fortress opening to its master. As we step across the threshold, the world outside falls away. The roar of the waves becomes a distant, muffled hum. The air inside is instantly different. It carries a complex perfume, a layered scent of cold minerals from the stone, a persistent dampness that never truly leaves, the clean, slightly chemical smell of lamp oil, and perhaps a faint, ghost-like aroma of coal smoke from the stove. It is the unique atmosphere of the lighthouse, a smell of purpose and isolation. Before us, the spiral staircase begins its long ascent. Carved from the same stone as the walls, the steps are worn in the center, forming shallow bowls where generations of keepers have placed their feet. They are a physical record of the lives lived here, of countless journeys up to the light and back down to the quiet solitude of the living quarters. The ascent is never rushed. Each step is a deliberate, mindful action. We can almost feel the rhythmic motion. Left foot, right foot. A slow, circular pilgrimage within the confines of the tower. The sound of our own footsteps is amplified. In the narrow space, a soft, shuffling echo that is our only companion on the climb. As we ascend, the quality of the wind's song changes, its low hum filtering through the thick walls, shifting in pitch as we move higher. The lower levels of the tower are dedicated to storage and sustenance. Here, in the coolest, most stable part of the structure, the keeper's foresight is on full display. This is not a pantry of convenience, but a bastion of survival. Imagine the careful inventory. Barrels of oil for the lamp, the lifeblood of the lighthouse, stand in orderly rows. These were the most precious cargo, handled with the utmost care. Sacks of flour for baking dense, hearty bread, barrels of salted meat and fish to provide sustenance through the long winter months when the supply boat could not reach them. Crates of hardtack biscuits, impossibly hard, but a reliable source of calories. Tins of condensed milk, jars of pickled vegetables, and sacks of dried beans and lentils. Everything is arranged with a sailor's neatness, a place for everything, and everything in its place. The keeper would have known their inventory by heart, the quiet satisfaction of this preparedness a balm against the anxiety of isolation. Here, too, are the tools of maintenance, coils of thick rope, pulleys, pots of thick lead-based paint, spare wicks for the lamp, and a heavy wooden toolbox filled with everything needed to keep the tower and its machinery in working order. Ascending further, we reach the keeper's domestic sphere. A small, circular room, a nest tucked midway up the stone column. The furnishings are sparse, but chosen for their utility and durability. A sturdy wooden table, perhaps bolted to the floor, stands with a single, straight-backed chair. Against one curved wall, a small, black cast-iron stove, its pipe disappearing up into the ceiling. This was the source of warmth, the place for cooking a simple meal, for boiling water for tea. Its gentle heat was a constant comfort against the chill that seeped from the stones. A bunk is built directly into the wall, a cozy alcove often containing a narrow mattress filled with horsehair or straw and covered with a thick handmade quilt. Above the bunk, a small shelf holds a few treasured possessions, a well-worn book with a cracked spine, a framed, faded photograph of a distant family, a piece of smooth driftwood that resembles a seabird. These small touches are what transform the stone fortress into a home, and then there are the windows. They are not large picture windows, but small, deep-set openings with thick glass, designed to withstand the impact of a rogue wave or a wind-flung piece of debris. They are like portholes on a ship, offering curated views of the outside world. From here, the sea is not an abstract concept, but a living, breathing entity. The keeper would watch its moods change throughout the day. The gentle, sun-dappled surface of a calm morning, the gray, featureless expanse of a foggy afternoon, the white-capped fury of an approaching storm. This window was the keeper's television, their weather vane, their constant, silent companion. It was through this small pane of glass that the keeper communed with the vast, wild world they had sworn to watch over. At the apex of the tower, after the final turn of the winding stair, we arrive at the sanctum sanctorum, the lantern room. This is the reason for the tower's existence, the home of the light itself. Stepping into this space is like stepping into a jewel box. The walls are mostly glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the sea and sky. But the eye is immediately drawn to the object at its center, the lamp, housed within its extraordinary lens. This is the Fresnel lens, a masterpiece of optical science and artisanal craft. Imagine it, a towering beehive of glass, a multifaceted diamond built by human hands. It is not a single piece of glass, but an intricate assembly of concentric rings of prisms, each one precisely cut and polished, all held together in a gleaming brass framework. Its inventor, Augustin Jean Fresnel, devised this system to capture every possible ray of light from the lamp, to bend and concentrate it into a single, powerful horizontal beam. Earlier lighthouses used simple mirrors, which were inefficient and weak. The Fresnel lens was a revolution, a device that could cast a warning light 20 miles or more across the dark water. To the keeper, this was not just a piece of equipment. It was an object of reverence. The keeper's day was built around the care of this magnificent apparatus. The most important ritual took place in the quiet hours of the morning. Long before the lamp was needed, the keeper would begin the process of cleaning the lens. This was a slow, meditative, and profoundly important task. They would often don soft slippers to avoid scratching the floor and wear a simple linen apron to protect the glass from their clothing. With a bucket of fresh water, a little polishing rouge, and a set of soft linen and chamois cloths, the work would begin. Each prism, each section of glass, was polished with a gentle, circular motion until it was utterly free of salt spray, dust, or soot. We can almost hear the faint swish of the cloth against the glass, a soft, rhythmic sound in the otherwise silent room. The keeper's own breath would fog the cool surface and then be wiped away, leaving behind a perfect, flawless clarity. During this process, the morning sun would stream through the lantern glass, and the prisms would catch the light, casting 1,000 tiny rainbows across the interior of the room, a private light show for the keeper alone. This daily polishing was an act of devotion, ensuring that not a single candle power of light would be wasted when night fell dot as dusk began to approach. The second great ritual of the day would commence, the preparation of the lamp. Let us imagine a time before electricity in the age of oil. The lamp itself was a complex mechanism. The keeper would first carefully remove the burner. If it was an argan lamp with its signature circular wick, they would meticulously trim the carbonized crust from the wick's edge with a special pair of scissors. A clean, even trim was essential for a bright, smokeless flame. An uneven wick would create soot, which could cloud the precious lens and dangerously dim the light. Next, the fuel reservoir would be filled. This could be whale oil in the earlier days, a clean-burning but expensive fuel, or later, kerosene. The keeper would use a brass can with a long spout, pouring the oil with a steady hand, ensuring not a drop was spilled. Finally, the keeper would attend to the clockwork mechanism. In many lighthouses, the light had a specific character, a unique pattern of flashes and eclipses that allowed sailors to identify it. This was achieved by rotating the entire lens assembly around the lamp. This rotation was powered by a clockwork motor driven by a heavy weight that descended through a channel in the center of the tower. Each day, the keeper would wind this mechanism, hoisting the great weight back to the top of the tower, much like winding a giant grandfather clock. The slow, steady tick-tock of this machinery would become another part of the tower's unique soundscape. And then, the moment of transformation. As the last light of the sun fades from the horizon, the keeper would perform their most sacred duty. Striking a long match, they would carefully light the wick. A small tentative flame would appear, and then, as the draft caught it, it would blossom into a bright, steady, brilliant light. The keeper would watch it for a few moments, adjusting the flame until it was perfect. Then, they would engage the clockwork. With a soft click and a gentle whir, the magnificent lens would begin its slow, silent rotation. Outside, in the gathering darkness, the transformation was miraculous. A beam of pure white light would suddenly slice through the night, sweeping across the surface of the sea in a slow, graceful, and utterly reliable arc. It was a promise made visible, a declaration of watchfulness. The keeper's work was done, but their duty was not over. They would now begin the long watch of the night. From a small stool in the lantern room, they would sit listening to the wind, listening to the steady turning of the lens, and watching the beam on its journey, ensuring that it never faltered, never dimmed. They were the guardian of this flame, a solitary priest in a temple of light. The work of tending the light, while demanding, was comprised of rituals that occupied only a fraction of the day. The rest was filled with a profound and unbroken quiet. The life of a lighthouse keeper was a masterclass in the art of solitude. For some, this was a crushing burden, the silence amplifying a sense of loneliness until it became unbearable. But for many others, for those who were suited to this life, the solitude was a gift. It was an opportunity to cultivate a rich inner world, to find peace in the absence of external noise and distraction. In these quiet hours, the keeper became a philosopher, a craftsman, a scholar. One of the greatest companions in the tower was the written word. The supply tender that brought barrels of oil and sacks of flour also brought crates of books and newspapers, sometimes months old. Imagine the keeper, after their evening meal, settling in at the small wooden table. The only light comes from a small reading lamp, its glow creating a small circle of warmth and civilization in the vast, dark wilderness of the sea. What stories filled these quiet hours? Perhaps they read tales of high adventure on the very seas they watched over, stories of pirates and explorers that stood in stark contrast to their own static, ordered existence. Or perhaps they preferred poetry, the meter and rhyme providing a different kind of rhythm to the constant beat of the waves. The works of Longfellow or Tennyson, with their epic scope and romantic view of nature, would have found a fitting home here. Many keepers were deeply religious, and the Bible would have been a source of daily comfort and contemplation. These books were not mere pastimes, they were portals. They were a connection to the breadth of human experience, a reminder of the world of ideas and emotions that existed beyond the horizon. The keeper might read a passage aloud, their own voice a strange and welcome sound in the silent room, the words filling the space before being absorbed by the thick stone walls. Another constant companion was the logbook. This was more than just a requirement of the job. It was the keeper's diary, a meticulous chronicle of their isolated world. Let us imagine the keeper at their table, dipping a steel-nipped pen into a small pot of black ink. The only sound is the scratch of the pen on the thick, fibrous paper. They would record the essential facts, the direction and strength of the wind, the state of the sea, the temperature. They would note the ships that passed, their names, their direction, their cargo if known. This was vital information, a record that could one day be used in maritime courts or accident investigations. But between the lines of these official entries, a personal history was being written. The sighting of a whale breaching the surface, the arrival of the first migrating geese of spring, a description of a particularly spectacular sunset. The logbook was a way to impose order on the passing of time, to give shape and meaning to days that might otherwise blur into one another. It was a conversation with the future, a testament that said, I was here. I kept watch, but the mind was not the only thing that needed occupation. The hands needed work too. The quiet hours were filled with patient, practical crafts. A keeper might spend an afternoon mending their fishing nets, the repetitive motion of knotting the twine, a form of active meditation. The sea that was their charge might also provide them with materials. A piece of driftwood, smoothed and shaped by the waves, could be transformed with a simple pocket knife into the likeness of a gull or a seal. This was not art for an audience, but for the self, a way to create a small point of beauty in a stark environment. Some became masters of scrimshaw, etching intricate scenes of ships and sea monsters onto whale teeth or bone, a legacy of the whale oil era. Others tackled the impossible puzzle of building a ship in a bottle, a craft that required immense patience and a surgeon's steady hand. These activities were the antithesis of the modern world's demand for speed and efficiency. They were slow, deliberate, and deeply satisfying. They were a way of pouring one's time and focus into a tangible object, creating a small anchor in the vast sea of a solitary life. And when the hands were still and the book was closed, there was one final spectacle. On clear, moonless nights, the keeper had a view of the cosmos that city dwellers can only dream of. They would climb to the lantern room, not to check the light, which turned with its own faithful rhythm, but to simply look up. With no light pollution to veil the heavens, the sky became a vast, glittering dome. The Milky Way was not a faint smudge, but a dense, shimmering river of light. so bright it seemed you could almost reach out and touch it. Constellations stood out in sharp relief, Orion the hunter, Cassiopeia the queen, their ancient stories. Playing out in the silent theater of the night, the keeper would witness shooting stars, fleeting streaks of cosmic dust burning up in the atmosphere, and perhaps even the ethereal, shifting curtains of the aurora borealis. In these moments, the stone tower did not feel like a prison. It felt like an observatory at the edge of the world. The keeper, a tiny, solitary human, was granted a direct and humbling connection to the infinite. It was a perspective that could shrink one's own worries to nothingness, replacing them with a profound sense of awe and wonder. The life of the keeper was governed by rhythms, not the artificial rhythm of the clock or the factory whistle, but the deep, ancient rhythms of the natural world. The most immediate of these was the tide. Twice each day, the sea would breathe. In and out, a slow, powerful respiration that set the tempo for the keeper's world. Imagine watching this from the tower window. The slow, inexorable rise of the water, creeping up the rocks until the tower seems truly an island, cut off from the land entirely. The sound of the waves at high tide is a deep, resonant surge, a sound of fullness and power. Then the turn. The almost imperceptible moment of slack tide, a brief, hushed pause before the water begins its long, slow retreat. As it falls, it reveals a hidden world rock slick with dark green seaweed, small tidal pools teeming with tiny creatures, the barnacle-encrusted foundations of the tower itself. The sound at low tide is different, a gentle, lapping whisper, the sound of the sea at rest. This daily ebb and flow was a constant reminder of the cycles of nature, a source of stability in its very predictability. It taught a lesson in patience, in the knowledge that everything that recedes will eventually return. This daily rhythm was nested within the larger, grander cycle of the seasons. Each season painted the keeper's world with a new palette of colors, sounds, and feelings. Each brought its own distinct duties and its own unique beauty. Spring would arrive not on a specific day, but as a subtle shift in the quality of the air, a softness that replaced the sharp bite of winter. The sun would feel different on the skin, a little warmer, a little more generous. The first sign would be the birds. The gulls, always present, would seem more active, their calls sharper. And then, the return of the migratory birds, the puffins with their painted beaks, the sleek, dark cormorants, the graceful terns. Their arrival filled the air with sound and movement, a joyful chorus after the silence of winter. The sea itself would seem to wake up, changing from a sullen gray to a hopeful blue-green, its surface sparkling in the strengthening sun. For the keeper, spring was a time for airing out the tower, for painting the ironwork to protect it from the salt, a time of renewal and preparation for the calmer months ahead. Summer brought with it a sense of deep calm. The days were long and languid, the sun rising early and setting late. The sea would often be as smooth as glass, its surface broken only by the gentle arc of a surfacing dolphin or the lazy drift of a jellyfish. On these days, the keeper might spend their free hours down on the rocks, casting a fishing line into the deep, cool water. The rhythmic motion of casting and reeling, the patient waiting for a tug on the line, was another form of meditation. But summer also brought its own challenge: fog. A thick, silent bank of white could roll in from the sea with surprising speed, swallowing the entire world. In these moments, the light of the lamp, so powerful at night, was rendered almost useless. This was when the foghorn was needed. The keeper would engage the machinery, and a deep, resonant, mournful sound would bellow out from the tower, a sound that could travel through the thickest fog to warn unseen ships. The hoomph of the horn would become the new rhythm, a heartbeat in the white silence. Autumn announced its arrival with a change in the wind. It would pick up a new strength, a new voice, a mournful howl that would wrap itself around the tower. The sky would offer dramatic displays of bruised, turbulent clouds. This was the season of storms. The keeper would watch their approach from the safety of the lantern room, a privileged spectator to nature's raw power. The sea would swell, its surface churned into a chaos of white-capped peaks and deep, dark troughs. Waves that in summer had gently lapped at the rocks would now crash against them with the force of a battering ram, sending spray and foam shooting. High up the stone walls, rattling the thick glass of the lantern room, the entire tower, for all its immense weight and strength, would seem to shudder with each impact. It was an awesome, terrifying, and yet beautiful spectacle. Inside, the keeper would remain calm. They would check the lamp, check the seals on the windows, and trust in the work of the long-dead masons. The tower was built for this, and the light, turning with its placid mechanical rhythm, seemed to defy the chaos outside, a small, unwavering point of order in a world gone wild. And then winter. Winter in a lighthouse was an exercise in extreme isolation. The world would be stripped of color, reduced to the stark contrasts of white snow, black rock, and gray sea. The supply boat would make its last trip before the ice. Set in, leaving the keeper truly alone for months on end. The cold was a physical presence, seeping through the stone, frosting the inside of the windows. A key duty in winter was to keep the outside of the lantern glass free of ice, which could refract the precious beam of light and render it ineffective. The keeper would have to venture out onto the narrow gallery, high above the churning, frigid sea, to scrape the ice away, a perilous and chilling task. The silence of winter was different from the quiet of summer. It was a deep, profound silence, broken only by the cracking of ice and the lonely cry of a winter gull. Yet there was a deep comfort to be found here. Inside their small, circular room, with a cast-iron stove glowing red with heat, a pot of soup simmering on top, the keeper was in their own small bubble of warmth and life. The wildness of the world was held at bay by the thick stone walls. It was a time for introspection, for reading, for sinking into the deep, slow rhythm of a world at rest, waiting patiently for the first subtle signs of spring's return. Beyond the cycles of the sun and seasons, the keeper lived within a world defined not by sight, but by sound. In the profound isolation of the tower, the ear became a finely tuned instrument, capable of discerning the subtlest shifts in the voice of the sea and the whisper of the wind. To the keeper, this was not noise, but a language, a constant flowing narrative of the world outside their stone walls. On the calmest days of summer, when the air was still and heavy, the sea would speak in murmurs. Imagine the sound, not of crashing waves, but of a slow, gentle lapping. A soft shush as a swell no higher than your hand meets the base of the rocks, followed by the quiet, trickling sound of the water receding like 1,000 tiny pebbles being gently stirred. This was the sound of the sea at peace, a sound that spoke of safety and serenity. The keeper would hear it through the open window of their living quarters, a gentle, rhythmic breathing that was as comforting and constant as their own. Then there was the sound of the turning tide against a shingle beach, if one was nearby. The hiss of the receding water as it dragged countless small, smooth stones with it. A long drawn-out swish followed by a pause, and then the gentle clatter as the next wave pushed them forward again. It was a sound of immense patience, of geological time being marked by the movement of stones. A sound that could easily lull a watchful mind into a state of deep meditation. The wind, too, had its own rich vocabulary. It was a constant companion to the tower, and its voice changed with its mood and direction. A gentle onshore breeze had a soft, rustling voice, a sound that carried hints of the land, the distant scent of grass and earth. But the true voice of the wind was heard during the gales. It would begin as a low moan, a mournful hum that seemed to vibrate deep within the stonework of the tower itself. The keeper would feel it in their feet, a subtle tremor that announced a coming change. As the storm grew, this moan would rise in pitch, becoming a high, keening whistle as the air was forced around the sharp edges of the lantern room's brass and glass. It sounded like a lament, a wild and lonely song sung to the empty sky. And in the heart of a true tempest, the wind would not whistle or moan, it would roar. It was a deep, guttural, all-encompassing sound, a form of sonic pressure that seemed to envelop the tower completely. It was the sound of pure elemental power, a sound that erased all other noises and left the keeper feeling like the sole inhabitant of a world being torn apart and remade by the heavens. Yet, within this roar, there was no malice. It was simply the sound of nature, vast and indifferent. The keeper learned not to fear it, but to listen to it, to respect its power from the unbreachable safety of their stone sanctuary. Amidst these grand symphonies of wind and water, there were other, more delicate sounds. The sharp, piercing cry of a gull riding the updrafts around the tower. It was a lonely sound, yet it was a sign of life, a connection to another living creature. Sometimes, on a calm evening, the keeper might hear the distant, barking calls of a seal colony. The sound would carry for miles across the water, a chorus of strange, almost human-like voices echoing in the twilight. But perhaps the most profound sound of all was the absence of it. When a thick fog rolled in, it did more than just obscure the view. It muffled the world. The gentle lapping of the waves would be dampened. The cry of the gulls would sound strangely close and then be swallowed by the white abyss. The world would shrink to the circumference of the tower, and the silence would be absolute, broken, only by the rhythmic, mournful bellow of the foghorn. This was a heavy-weighted silence, a silence that could feel both peaceful and deeply unsettling. It was in these moments of profound quiet that the keeper was truly, completely alone with their thoughts, the silence of the world amplifying the sounds of their own inner life. For weeks, and sometimes months, the keeper's world was a closed loop of stone, sea, and sky. Time was measured in tides and sunsets, but this sort existence was punctuated by moments of profound significance, moments when the outside world would briefly, tangibly make its presence known. The most important of these was the arrival of the supply tender. The keeper would know when to expect it, roughly, and for days beforehand, their eyes would scan the horizon with a particular focus. Then, one morning, they would see it. First, just a faint smudge of smoke against the clean line where the sea met the sky. It was a sight that would quicken the pulse, not with alarm, but with a quiet, deep-seated anticipation. This tiny vessel was their lifeline, their sole point of physical contact with the rest of humanity. As the boat grew larger, the keeper would make their preparations, checking the ropes and the hoist mechanism that was often used to lift supplies from the choppy water at the base of the tower. They would watch as the small steam or diesel-powered boat skillfully maneuvered as close as it dared, its crew small figures moving with purpose on the deck. The exchange was often brief and conducted at a distance, a series of shouted greetings and instructions carrying over the sound of the waves and the boat's engine. "All well, keeper?" "All well. Mail and provisions for you." These simple words were imbued with immense meaning, a confirmation of connection, a reassurance that they were not forgotten. The crew of the tender were the keeper's only visitors, and their faces, seen for only an hour every few months, became as familiar as family. Crates of food, barrels of oil, and mechanical parts would be carefully hoisted up, and in return, the keeper would lower reports and perhaps a crate of their own, containing letters and anything else that needed to be sent back to the world of men. The most precious item, however, was always the mailbag. A simple, sturdy canvas, sack sealed against the sea spray. It was the last thing to be brought up, and the keeper would handle it with a unique reverence. Inside the quiet of their quarters, the ritual of opening the mail would begin. This was never a task to be rushed. The keeper would savor it. They would untie the knot and lay out the contents on their table. Letters from a spouse, from children, from siblings or friends. The sight of familiar handwriting on the envelopes was a joy in itself. Each letter was a voice from another life, telling tales of harvests, of births, of the small, everyday occurrences of a world the keeper was temporarily apart from. They would read each letter slowly, perhaps multiple times, hearing the voice of the sender in their mind, the words painting pictures that would sustain them for weeks to come. Then there was the newspaper, often a month or more out of date. Reading it was a strange experience. Great world events, political upheavals, new inventions. All of it reached the keeper as settled history, stripped of its urgency and immediacy. It was like reading a message from a distant star, the light of the event having taken a long time to travel to their remote outpost. This temporal distance gave the keeper a unique, philosophical perspective on the affairs of the world, seeing them not as a chaotic rush, but as another slow, unfolding tide in the grand ocean of human history. These echoes from the world were a vital nourishment for the soul. They were a reminder that their solitary watch, their steadfast light, was part of something much larger than themselves. It was a service to this world of letters and newspapers, this world that sailed just beyond the horizon. A keeper did not measure their life in the tower in days or weeks, but in decades. A young man who first climbed the winding stair, full of resolve and a sense of adventure, would become a gray-haired man whose movements were perfectly attuned to the rhythms of his home. His body knew the exact pressure needed to close the heavy oaken door against a gale. His hands could service the lamp mechanism in complete darkness, and his ears could tell the difference between a northerly and a northeasterly wind from the sound it made in the stovepipe. The tower became an extension of his own body, and just as the keeper aged and changed, so too did the world outside, and slowly, inexorably, technology began to creep across the water, altering the nature of the keeper's ancient vigil. The first great change was often the telegraph, a single, thin cable laid across the seabed, linking the lighthouse to the mainland. Suddenly, the crushing isolation was punctured. Weather reports, shipping news, and even personal messages could be transmitted in Morse code, the rhythmic clicking a strange, new sound in the tower's quiet symphony. The month-long wait for news became an hour-long wait. The solitude was still immense, but the silence was no longer absolute. The most profound change, however, was in the light itself. The age of oil, with its complex, intimate rituals, began to wane. One day, the supply tender would bring not barrels of kerosene, but crates containing generators, wires, and a new kind of lamp, the incandescent bulb. A marvel of clean, effortless, and immensely powerful light. The old routines honed over a lifetime were replaced by new ones. The daily trimming of the wick, the polishing of soot from the burner, the careful filling of the oil reservoir, these meditative tasks vanished. In their place came the smell of diesel for the generator, the checking of gauges and voltages, the simple, almost anticlimactic flick of a switch. The light was brighter, more reliable, but some of the magic, some of the intimate connection between the keeper and the flame was undeniably lost. The keeper was no longer a tender of a flame, but the operator of a machine. With electricity came radio. The keeper could now hear the actual voices of the world, news broadcasts, music, stories. A constant stream of human sound filling the small room. The profound quiet that had shaped the minds of generations of keepers was now a choice, one that could be ended by turning a knob. And finally, the last great change arrived: automation. Engineers came with sensors that could detect the fading of daylight, with machines that could automatically switch on the lamp and change the bulbs when they failed. The clockwork was replaced by a silent electric motor. The light no longer needed a human hand. Imagine that last day. The keeper, now an old man, packing a single small suitcase in a circular room. He would take one last walk up the spiral staircase, his hand brushing against the cool, familiar stone. He would look at the magnificent lens, now housing a simple, powerful bulb. He would step out onto the gallery and look at the sea, his companion for 50 years. There would be no ceremony, no grand farewell. He would simply descend the stairs for the last time, lock the heavy oak door from the outside, and be taken away by the tender. And that evening, as he watched from a distant shore, he would see the light come on, a perfect, steady, reliable beam sweeping across the water. His light, a light that no longer needed him. His watch was over. But the light, the promise he had tended for a lifetime, remained. The world of the lighthouse is a world with its own language, a collection of words and terms as solid and specific as the structures themselves. To truly understand the keeper's life, we must first understand the words they used, the lexicon of their profession. Let us take a slow, quiet walk through this special dictionary and appreciate the meaning behind the terms that define their reality. Our first word is casein. Before a single stone could be laid on a submerged rock or a sandy seabed, a foundation had to be created. A caisson is a watertight retaining structure, a giant, hollow chamber, often circular, that is lowered through the water to the seafloor. Once it rests on the bottom, the water is pumped out, creating a dry, pressurized environment where men could work, digging away the soft sand and mud until they reached solid bedrock. Imagine the sound inside this chamber, the hiss of the compressed air, the muffled sound of the sea just outside the iron walls, the rhythmic scrape of shovels on stone. The caisson was a bubble of human endeavor at the bottom of the sea, the first defiant act in raising a light from the depths. It is a word that speaks of immense pressure, ingenuity, and the hard, unseen work upon which every offshore tower is built. Our next term is lampblack. In the age of oil and wick, perfect light was a constant battle against imperfect combustion. Lampblack is the fine, powdery soot, a form of pure, amorphous carbon that results from an improperly trimmed wick or an incorrect draft. It was the enemy of the light. A small deposit of this velvety black dust on the inside of the magnificent lens could absorb and scatter the precious light, dimming the beam that sailors' lives depended on. The keeper's daily cleaning ritual was, in essence, a war against lampblack. It was a physical manifestation of inefficiency, a dark powder that had to be meticulously wiped away to allow for pure, unblemished light. It is a word that smells of oil and soot and feels like the softest, darkest velvet beneath a clean cloth. Let us consider the day mark. A lighthouse's primary duty is at night, but its usefulness does not end at sunrise. During the day, the tower itself serves as a crucial navigational aid. Its day mark is its unique visual signature, the pattern and colors in which it is painted, allowing mariners to identify their location. A tower might be pure white to stand out against a dark, rocky headland. It might be painted with bold red and white bands, or black and white diamonds, or even a checkerboard pattern. These were not decorative choices. They were a code, a visual language read across miles of water. The keeper's duties included the slow, patient work of repainting the tower, maintaining the vibrancy of its day mark against the fading effects of sun and salt. It is a word that speaks of identity, clarity, and being seen. Next, we have the wiki. This was the informal, affectionate, and sometimes teasing slang term for a lighthouse keeper. It derives, of course, from their most fundamental duty in the age of oil, the endless trimming and tending of the lamp's wick. To be a wickie was to be part of a small elite brotherhood of men defined by this single crucial task. It was a name that carried with it a sense of reliability, of stubbornness, of a certain kind of quiet competence. While the official title was keeper, the name wickie speaks more to the hands-on, day-to-day reality of the job. It's a word that honors the small, repetitive actions that ensure the great light never falters. Finally, let us understand the lens order. Not all Fresnel lenses were created equal. They were classified by their size and focal length into a hierarchy known as orders. A first-order lens was the most powerful, a true giant standing over 12 feet tall, used in the most important coastal lighthouses, capable of casting a beam for over 20 miles. A smaller harbor or lake might require only a sixth-order lens small enough to sit on a table. The order of the lens was a measure of the lighthouse's importance, of the level of danger it guarded against. When a keeper spoke of their lens, they would always mention its order. "I keep a first-order light," they might say, and those words would be imbued with a sense of immense responsibility and pride. It is a term that speaks of power, scale, and the carefully measured distribution of light. Our keeper's tower, as solitary as it felt, was part of a global family of sentinels. Each lighthouse has a story, but some have become legends, their very names synonymous with courage and ingenuity. Let us drift away from our single tower and visit the memories of a few of these legendary lights. Our first stop is a place of primordial wonder, the Pharos of Alexandria. Long before the Fresnel lens, long before the age of steam and steel, on a small island off the coast of Egypt stood the first great lighthouse of history, the Pharos of Alexandria. Built in the 3rd century BC, it was for centuries one of the tallest man-made structures in the world, and one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Imagine its scale. Its base was a massive square fortress, rising to an octagonal midsection, topped by a circular tower where the fire burned. It was said to be built of light-colored stone, a brilliant beacon under the Egyptian sun. We cannot know for certain, but legends say that during the day, a polished mirror was used to reflect sunlight into a beam, while at night, a great bonfire guided ships into the busiest port of the ancient world. It stood for over 1,000 years, a testament to the ambition of the Ptolemaic kings and the skill of their architects. The Pharos was the blueprint, the very idea of a lighthouse made manifest in stone and fire. From ancient Egypt, we travel north to a place of treacherous sea and dogged persistence, the Eddystone Lighthouse. 14 miles off the coast of Plymouth, England, lie the Eddystone Rocks, a treacherous reef that is completely submerged at high tide. To build a light here seemed impossible. The first attempt, a whimsical wooden tower, was swept away in a great storm. The second, also of wood, burned down. The challenge fell to an engineer named John Smeaton in the 1750s. He looked not to carpentry, but to nature, for his inspiration. He observed the mighty oak tree, with its strong trunk and wide-spreading roots. He designed his tower to be built of massive granite blocks, but with a revolutionary innovation. The blocks were cut to interlock with one another, using dovetail joints, like pieces of an immense, 3-dimensional puzzle. The tower was bound together by its own weight and geometry. Smeaton's Eddystone Lighthouse stood for over a century, a triumph of engineering that became the model for countless offshore lighthouses to come. It was a victory not of force, but of intelligent design and harmony with nature's power. Finally, we journey to Scotland and to a testament of sheer human will, the Bell Rock Lighthouse. 11 miles off the coast of Angus, Scotland, the Bell Rock was a place of terror for sailors. It was visible for only a few hours at low tide. In the early 1800s, the engineer Robert Stevenson, grandfather of the writer Robert Louis Stevenson, took on the task of lighting the rock. For the first 2 years, his men could only work during the brief window of low tide, often in freezing waist-deep water, to carve the foundation. They lived on a ship moored a mile away, and later in a temporary barracks built on stilts above the waves, a tiny, precarious village in the middle of the North Sea. The story of Bell Rock is one of meticulous planning and communal effort. Stevenson's design, inspired by Smeaton's Eddystone, resulted in a tower so strong that it stands unchanged to this day, the world's oldest sea-washed lighthouse. It is a monument to the idea that, with enough patience and courage, a light can be raised in even the most hopeless of places. The keeper was a watcher of light and of ships, but they were also, by necessity, a watcher of nature. In their slow, quiet world, they became intimate observers of the wild lives that unfolded around their stone tower. Their world was not empty, but filled with the drama and beauty of the flora and fauna that thrived in the harsh coastal environment. Let us first watch the gannet. The gannet is a master of the air and sea. The keeper would watch them for hours, soaring on the wind currents high above the water. With brilliant white plumage, black-tipped wings, and a pale gold head, they are a striking sight against a gray sky. But their true spectacle is the hunt. From 100 feet up, a gannet will spot a fish. It folds its wings, transforming itself into a living spear, and plunges headfirst into the sea, hitting the water at tremendous speed. For a moment, it vanishes in a plume of white spray. The keeper would watch and wait, and then, a few seconds later, the bird would surface, often with a silver fish in its beak, before taking to the air once more. It is a display of breathtaking power and precision. Now let us look closer at the rocks, at the world of the tidal pool. When the tide receded, it would leave behind small, self-contained universes in the hollows of the rocks. The keeper, walking the shoreline on a calm day, would gaze into these natural aquariums. Here, life was slow and patient. A starfish, in hues of purple or orange, would be clinging motionless to a rock. A sea anemone, looking more like a flower than an animal, would gently wave its tentacles in the still water, waiting for a tiny shrimp to drift by. Small crabs would scuttle sideways from crevice to crevice, and translucent prawns would hang suspended in the water. These tidal pools were worlds of intense color and quiet drama, a reminder that, even in the smallest of spaces, life persists in vibrant and beautiful forms. The keeper would also learn the character of the Atlantic gray seal. The seals were the keeper's neighbors. They would watch them with a special fondness. The Atlantic gray seal is a large, powerful animal, but possessed of a deep curiosity. A keeper working on the rocks below the tower would often look up to see a sleek, dark head has silently broken the surface of the water, its large, dark eyes watching them with an intelligent and inquisitive gaze. They would see the seals hauling their heavy bodies out onto the rocks to bask in the sun, their barks and mournful calls echoing across the water. They were fellow inhabitants of this lonely coast, another group of beings adapted to a life between the water and the land. We must not forget the humble lichen, and what of the life that grew on the tower itself? On the ancient stone, exposed to salt and wind, a patient life took hold. Lichen, this remarkable organism, a partnership between a fungus and an alga, is a master of survival. The keeper would observe its slow, inexorable spread. It would form intricate, map-like patterns on the stone, splashes of gray-green, bright, rusty orange, and deep black. It grew so slowly that its progress was measured in years, not days. The lichen was a living calendar, a testament to the passage of time, a thin, colorful skin of life clinging to the unyielding stone of the keeper's home. It was proof that, in the face of the harshest elements, life finds a way not just to survive, but to create beauty. And so, our journey through the keeper's world finds its quiet end. The towers still stand, steadfast on their rocky shores. Many of their lights still burn, their beams still sweeping across the dark waters, but inside their stone walls, there's silence, a new kind of silence, deeper than the one the keepers knew. It is the silence of absence. The light is automated now. A sensor more reliable than the human eye detects the fall of dusk and gives the command. An electric motor, more tireless than any clockwork, begins its slow, perfect rotation. The light is a marvel of efficiency, a faithful servant that asks for nothing in return. It performs its duty without thought, without feeling, without the need for a warm bed or a letter from home. The promise of the light is kept. But the keeper is gone. If you were to climb the spiral stair today, you would find the stone steps just as worn, hollowed by the memory of countless journeys. But they are cold now, even in the summer sun. They are no longer warmed by the passage of daily life. You might stand in the circular room where the keeper slept and read and waited. The air would no longer smell of oil and salt and coal smoke, but only of cool, damp stone and time itself. The window still looks out upon the same eternal sea, but there is no one there to watch its changing moods. What then is the legacy of the keeper if the light no longer needs them? Perhaps the legacy is not in the light itself, but in the space between the light's flashes. It is in the quiet dedication, the patience, the profound understanding of solitude. The keeper's life was a lesson, written in stone and water, on the value of a slow, deliberate existence. It was a testament to the fact that a life of immense purpose can be lived in a small space, that fulfillment can be found not in constant action, but in steady, faithful watching. In our own world, a world that hums with ceaseless noise and blinding speed, the memory of the lighthouse keeper offers a kind of sanctuary for the mind. It reminds us that there is a deep peace to be found in simple, repetitive tasks. It reminds us of the wisdom in listening to the rhythms of nature, the tide, the wind, the seasons. It reminds us that it is okay to be alone, to be quiet, to simply be. The keeper's true legacy, then, is an idea. The idea of a steady, unwavering light in the darkness. A single point of focus and calm in the midst of chaos. A quiet mind in a noisy world. This is a light that we can all tend to within ourselves. And so, let the image of that lonely tower recede into your mind. Let it become a dream. Feel the solid stone at your back. Hear the gentle whisper of the sea. See the steady, sweeping beam, a rhythm to match your own slow, steady breathing. The watch is over. The logbook is closed. The world is safe and quiet. All that is left is the light and the deep, peaceful dark. It is time to rest,